Hello, and welcome to the 2020 National Diversity Council webinar series. My name is Dejaron Campbell, and I support our learning and development resources and programs. We're extremely excited to have you join us. Our topic for today is Understanding Diversity of Thought, the key to stronger collaboration, better communication, and less conflict. Our featured presenter is Dr. Mike Patterson. Dr. Patterson is currently a principal at Core Strength. Dr. Patterson, I will now turn the presentation over to you.
Thanks, Dejaron. I appreciate the opportunity to speak on this emerging topic that represents a new frontier in diversity of thought. And I'd like to begin with the end in mind. I always think it's important to understand what we're striving for at the outset of any endeavor. And so my end in mind for our time together today is that I want everyone who views this webinar to develop a greater appreciation for people who see things differently than they do. And I want people who see things differently to be able to openly dialogue about those different perspectives in positive and productive ways, in ways that make us better. Better teams, better organizations, better communities, and ultimately a better country will result when we can effectively embrace different points of view and perspectives. It's also important that we actively work to understand from where these different perspectives come. And one of the big elements that I want to explore today and this conversation we're going to have is that difference is often based on how we're wired. It all often comes from our personality. And so that's what I hope to explore today. And it's just a real honor to be able to do this with and for the membership of the National Diversity Council. So just a little bit about me. I'm a principal and one of the authors at a company called Core Strengths. We're a global talent development company based in Southern California. And when friends ask what my company does at a dinner party or we're just out somewhere, I offer a pretty simple answer. We're in the relationship business. We help people work better together. We help people collaborate, communicate, manage conflict, and coach more effectively. I also have a side hustle, and my side hustle is that I teach in the doctoral program at Pepperdine University's Graduate School of Education and Psychology. And much of my thinking on this particular topic today has been informed by scholarly research. So it's grounded in scholarship, but also through conversations and work that I've been able to do with a number of really, really smart doctoral students, and also some clients I've worked with over the years, many great clients, in fact. And a few people listening to this webinar may also be familiar with my book called Have a Nice Conflict: How to Find Success and Satisfaction in the Most Unlikely Places. It's kind of a fun, easy business fable, easy to read, kind of a good summer read. But it talks about how some of these ideas that I'm going to present today kind of show up and can be lived out in the context of workplace conflict and just interpersonal conflict in general, how we can do conflict better and hopefully prevent a lot of conflict. We work with a lot of great clients. Many of the clients we work with are household names. You're familiar with many of them, and a few of our clients you may have never heard of. But we work with great people around the world. And if you'd like to hear some of our clients' stories about their experience and working with us, and we work with them in a lot of different ways. You see some of our solution areas on the screen there. You might want to check out some of these client stories on our website. We've got some videos and some other documentation there. Our website's corestrengths.com, and I'll offer that web address later in the presentation. And if you go to the resources tab on our website, you'll see some of these great videos and just hear how we've helped organizations in a number of areas. The way we work with people is usually by providing assessments, training, and then access to a platform. We always begin with an assessment called the SDI 2.0, and I'll talk about that a little later in the presentation. And the purpose of the assessment is it raises one's awareness of self and others. It's really foundational to everything we do. The training we do helps people develop relational skills, how to bring out the best in themselves and the people around them. And then the digital platform allows relationship intelligence, and I'll define that term a little later, to be embedded into the way people work on a daily basis. And while everything we do begins with awareness, we can't stop there. We've got to help people actually put into practice these skills, these insights, in a way that causes us to interact with people differently and more productively. And so we start with awareness, but we're always moving toward appreciation and effectiveness. Our goal for the people we work with is for people to work better together in ways that support their organization's mission. And so that organization can achieve its goals, performance, add value to the world, and people can be more successful in their roles. So I'd like to begin with a few important questions, and I'm going to begin by addressing these important questions using some scholarly research. I think it's always important to ground ourselves in science, some common sense, and then some experiences I've had working with clients. And all of that will support my answers to these questions. And in answering the questions, I hope to make the case for diversity of thought. So let me begin with a question that most of you who are viewing this webinar probably find pretty easy to answer. If you're watching this webinar because you're a member of the National Diversity Council, you would say, like I say, the answer to this question, does diversity make us better, is absolutely yes. And that's what I would say too. And there are likely some moral, ethical, religious arguments that would cause us to answer this question affirmatively. But as a social scientist, I'm also pleased to say that there is evidence, good, solid, empirical research that makes the answer to this question an overwhelming yes as well. So if you're a business person, and there's probably a lot of business people watching this webinar now who say that really what matters most is the bottom line. Better is based on the bottom line. Then you'd probably be interested in a study that was conducted by the Boston Consulting Group that looked at 1,700 different companies in 8 different countries. And these companies were of different sizes and they worked in different industries. And the study found that increasing the diversity of leadership teams leads to more and better innovation. In other words, better products and services, and improve financial performance. The researchers in this study found that by increasing diversity, there was a direct effect on the bottom line. Companies that have more diverse management teams have 19% higher revenue due to innovation. And this finding is huge for technology companies who are focused on new ideas, and growth. It shows that diversity is not just a metric that should be strived for because it's the right thing to do. And I would say it is the right thing to do to bring inclusion and equity into the lifeblood of an organization. That's absolutely the right thing to do, but it's also critical for successfully generating revenue and growing the business. Um, and the reason this makes sense to me, and probably you as well, is that a diversity of minds, ideas, and approaches allow teams to find solutions that are creative and take into account multiple angles on a problem. And this makes the solution better, it makes it stronger, it makes it more well-rounded and optimized. So if we want to create better, innovative problems that allow us to grow our revenue, we need diversity. Many of you probably are familiar with this classic, this seminal article that was published in Scientific American in 2014. And the author of this article, Catherine Williams, does a great job because she summarizes much of the key research that supports how diversity makes us smarter. And if you haven't read the article, I suggest you do so. And as she points to all of this research about how diversity makes us smarter, she kind of summarizes the big idea with this. When you bring people together to solve problems in groups, the reason groups are better at solving problems oftentimes is because they bring different information, opinions, and perspectives. The positive influence of diversity is really based on this concept of informational diversity. Um, Phillips argues that diversity for diversity's sake is not really the purpose. Rather, when we bring people together who are different, it's for the purpose of solving problems and advancing our organization or even society's goals. And the reason we can be more effective at solving problems and moving closer to achieving our goals is because different perspectives, different information, different ideas allow us to solve complex problems. If it's easy, if we're just going to do things the way we've always done things, then we don't need diversity of thought. We don't need different perspectives. If we're just going to do it the way the boss says we should do it, then we don't need diversity of thought. We don't need different perspectives. But if we want to do things differently, if we want to do things better, if we want to come up with different products, we need to think differently. And I like to put this into perspective by thinking about a complex machine like an automobile. Um, Imagine trying to design, manufacture, transport, market, sell, and maintain a car with people who have exactly the same backgrounds and perspectives. Now, what if all the folks who are standing around the sales floor at your local dealership were responsible for everything, start to finish? And I have nothing against these folks. They're usually pretty good at what they do, but they don't have the diverse perspectives and experiences necessary to deal with everything that goes into such a complex product like an automobile. And so obviously auto manufacturers need interdisciplinary teams to be successful. It's common sense. And most products in our world today aren't simple anymore. I mean, perhaps there are a few, but most of the products that we desire and that are changing the world have a degree of complexity that make it necessary, absolutely necessary, for people with different ideas and backgrounds and perspectives to bring their talents to bear to make that product a success. Some would even say we need actors in the car business. We might even need Matthew McConaughey to be our pitch man, because his different perspective, who he is, adds value. And I would contend that everyone on a team, because of who they are, adds value. Different perspectives, skills, and ways of thinking, along with social diversity, which is still critically important, is really the answer to dealing with complex issues. So, what is diversity of thought? Here's my second question I want to tackle. Until recently, most organizational diversity initiatives were focused on fairness for legally protected populations and historically underrepresented populations in the workforce or in senior levels of management in organizations. And no doubt, there's much more work that needs to be done in these areas. We're not finished by a long way. We're not finished. But smart organizations are also looking for opportunities to introduce additional and even more powerful approaches to embrace the full range of human diversity. In other words, how people think and see differently. And many would argue that this idea of diversity of thought, leveraging, embracing, making the most of these different perspectives and these different ways of seeing things and different filters that people have, they see that as the new frontier in the world of diversity. And here are some ideas that characterize this new frontier, based on some excellent forward-thinking work from some really smart folks at Deloitte. Though the term may be relatively new to our lexicon, diversity of thought, we've all experienced it our entire lives. We know what it feels like to have people, to work and engage with people who see things very differently than we do. You probably saw it in your last team meeting. We have people have different views on what our priorities should be, how we should invest our resources, who should be part of a team or work on a particular product. Maybe you saw some diversity of thought when you were planning your next vacation with your spouse or your partner. One person wanted to go to the beach, the other person wanted to go to the mountains or just to a big city to see the museums and to experience culture. We have different views on what's valuable, what's important, what we should focus on, what we should do. And if those two examples don't do the trick for you, just some evening flip through a few cable news channels, and you'll find several compelling examples of how people see events in the news and interpret those events very differently. Now, the idea that this differences in the way we see and think, it's shaped by our culture, our background, experiences, and personalities. That's core to diverse thoughts. And companies that bring together people who think differently from one another, for example, some analytical types with creative folks who and others who see the big picture, and then a few folks who like to get deep in the weeds and look at the details around process, can create conversations that stimulate new ideas and drive efficiency. Really, the key is to bring out the best in each person on the team. And as they see things differently, make it safe for them to articulate their different views and make it okay for them um, to be and express who they really are. I think that's the essence of diversity. Um, so diversity of thought goes beyond just a simple everyone should be treated equally by recognizing that there are differences and we respond to them. But the folks at Deloitte said this: instead of the focus on the focus should be on realizing the full potential of people, and in turn the organization by acknowledging and appreciating the potential promise of each person's perspective and different way of thinking. And wouldn't the world be a better place if we could recognize and embrace and create opportunities for people to maximize their potential, to truly be everything that they could be, and we invested in people and made it safe for people to do that. That's the spirit of diversity of thought. Now, why is diversity of thought important to us? What does it do for us? Well, one of the things it does for us um, is that it makes us better because we work harder. Um, if we are going into a meeting and we think the decision is, it's a no-brainer, it's a layup, it's a done deal, we're probably not going to dig in and really think through our arguments in favor of that decision. We're not gonna work hard to do that. But if we're going into a meeting and we feel like there's going to be some pushback, not everyone is going to agree, not everyone is going to see it the same way, we're probably going to dig in. We're going to prepare better. We're going to think through our arguments and be very clear and logical in how we present our ideas, and that will make us better as a group. Diversity of thought keeps us from groupthink and some expert or some boss or someone who says this is the way it should be, end of discussion. If we're truly embracing diversity of thought, then we're all able to contribute to the decision. And that invites creativity. We consider the alternatives. And when we consider the alternatives and we're thinking expansively and creatively, that invites creativity and growth and efficiencies. There's an ancient Hebrew proverb that comes to mind when I uh, think about the importance of diversity of thought. And the old proverb says this: as iron sharpens iron, so one friend sharpens another. When we are offering a different perspective in a productive and respectful way to a colleague, we're really inviting him or her to sharpen their thinking. And sharper thinking is what we need um, if we're going to address complex challenges. Now, what is this diversity of thought, this different way of thinking? What's it shaped by? Well, there's many factors that affect the way we think, but the factor I'm going to focus on for the remainder of this presentation is how we're wired from the perspective of personality. And in particular, one personality theory that causes us to see things differently. But for practitioners, those who work in the real world, the most fundamental question is, how do we harness the power of diversity for good in organizations? So we've said diversity makes us better. We've sort of defined what diversity of thought looks like, but how do we harness it to bring value to our organizations and our team. In other words, very simply, how do I bring out the best in the people around me so that we're serving the common good more efficiently and more effectively? Well, my answer to this question is that we bring out the best in people when we exercise relationship intelligence, or RQ. And so the rest of the presentation is really going to be unpacking this idea of what relationship intelligence is and how it can help us bring out the best in the people around us and make it safe for people to offer different perspectives. In other words, to harness the power of diversity of thought. And so what is relationship intelligence? Well, I'll give it a really simple definition. Relationship intelligence is insight to adjust your approach to make your interactions with people more effective. It's insight about how people think differently, how they see the world differently, how they have different drives, and how they want to be communicated with differently, so that as we're working with them, we can make the most appropriate adjustments in the way we communicate and collaborate and maybe prevent interpersonal conflict, so that they're able to be to offer their different perspectives and really be at their best, and we can be at our best. Relationship intelligence helps us bring out the best in ourselves and others and encourages diversity of thought. So I'd like to share a few big ideas. And that was the definition, but let me put a little meat on those bones and flesh out the idea of relationship intelligence, or RQ, so you can understand why it's important and how it might help you implement a harnessing or embrace of diversity of thought in your organization. So let's begin with this visual metaphor of a buoy and anchor. Let's talk about the importance of getting the full picture when we think about people and their personalities. And it's important to recognize that there's much more to see. There's much more to people than we see on the surface. We see the way that people behave or use their strengths. That's like the buoy floating on the surface of the water. We see the buoy, we see people's strengths, we see how they're behaving, and we often judge people by what we see them doing. It's the basis for the stories we tell about them. It's like that buoy floating on the water. And that buoy's going to float around, move around based on the conditions, the wind, the tide, if a boat's going by and creating a wake, and people will behave differently in different situations. But to really understand people and inform our stories about them, we need to consider what's beneath the surface and what's really driving that behavior, and that's their motives. When we don't get the full picture of people by considering their motives, we put collaboration at risk, because we are likely to tell stories to ourselves about other people's behavior that isn't the full and complete story, and those stories may get in the way of how we work with people. At Core Strengths, that's the company I work with, we use an assessment called the SDI 2.0 to help people access and apply relationship intelligence. And it's this insight that allows us to adjust our approach, make our interactions more effective. And the reasons we need to make those adjustments is because each of us, each person on your team, is wired a little differently. So a one-size-fits-all approach won't work. And another way to say that they're wired differently is that their anchor may be in a little different place. Um, their motives may be a little different, and it's important to understand that. Um, it's important to see and understand people at a deeper level than simply judging people or telling yourself stories about people based on what you see on the surface. There's more to know and see and understand, and that's why we have to get the full picture. Now, why is it important to understand motives in particular? Well, it's because motives influence what you see and do. If we're trying to understand how people may see things differently, and motives can explain how people see and do things differently, then it's inherent that we need to understand motives. So what we know about motives, and we've learned this from psychology and science, is that people are really driven by three core motives. No matter what their race, gender, sexual orientation, country of origin, all those things that on the surface make us different, we all have something in common, something that's part of our humanity, and that's we're all driven by these three core motives. And the SDI, this assessment we use, measures how each of us values, prioritizes, and blends these three core motives. And to make things easy to remember and to allow for a kind of a common language that's easy for everybody to use, we've color coded these motives, and we've labeled them blue, red, and green, and provided some really simple words that explain what those colors represent. And as these motives work together within each of us, we have that becomes a motivational value system. The way a person prioritizes, blends, and values these three core motives, and that's represented by a dot on this SDI triangle. And that's a good thing, because imagine we can put an entire team of people on a triangle representing their different drives, their different motives, and how they see things differently. So in just one visual snapshot, we can get a sense for the um, diverse nature of our team from this motivational perspective, and how people may see and do things differently because of their motives. So a little more on the three motives. The blue motive is about people. It's a drive to help others, and someone who's largely driven by a blue motive, um, they they enjoy and are energized by getting to connect with people and build relationships and be helpful. And some of the time that's important for us to some of the time we all want to help. So the red motive is really more about performance, is this drive to achieve results and get things done. And some of the time we all want to get things done. And the green motive is about process. It's this drive to make sure things are orderly and right and documented and correct. And we've looked at the research and we've thought independently about it. And so why is all this talk about motives important when it comes to collaboration, teamwork, and better problem solving? And how does this help us work toward diversity of thought? Well, the key to effective collaboration and effective leadership, for that matter, is to bring out the best in ourselves and the people around us. And the key to bringing out the best in the people around us is by honoring what matters to them. And when you understand and appreciate the motives that drive a colleague, you're in a better position to honor them in the way you interact with them. For example, a colleague might prioritize data and facts and a more deliberate approach. So he might be put off by my quick decisions. Likewise, someone who is driven by a concern for people might appreciate me taking a little more time to check in with them and on a personal level and see how they're doing. Um, the idea is that if we are able to honor who they are and what matters to them, then we're more likely to bring out the best in them when we're collaborating. And so the essence of this understanding of motives, the reason we want to understand motives, what drive people, is so that we can honor them and what's important to them in the way we interact with them. And I think that's also a truth that should be embedded in any work we do in this area of diversity. Everybody matters and is worthy of respect, dignity, and honor. Now, our motives change in conflict. Um, that means that what we want, what we see, and what we do changes when we are in conflict, when we're feeling like we're under kind of a personal attack. And so the way I define conflict is conflict's an emotional response to a perceived threat to our values or our sense of self-worth. And when people are in conflict, it's more difficult for them to do their best work. It's harder to collaborate and communicate in productive ways when we're trying to defend what's important to us. So if we want to maximize the value of diverse thinking, we need to understand how to have healthy opposition. And that's a term we use in our training, and be able to objectively disagree with a colleague, to share different ideas and perspectives, to even debate those views vigorously, those different views vigorously, but not have it feel like a personal attack. And understanding a person's motives helps us do that. And I would submit that many of the challenges we see on teams and in organizations are because people are operating um, from a place of conflict. Um, they don't feel like it's safe to be authentically who they are, or something they value is under attack. And so one of the things that we spend a good deal of time on in our training and our books and materials is what triggers conflict in people based on what's important to them, and what conflict looks like for each person on the team. So here's another big idea that we use in our work to support relationship intelligence. It's this idea that your strengths are your tools. So you have strengths. Remember my buoy and anchor sort of visual metaphor from a few slides ago. You have strengths that are behaviors that people use to get things done in their relationships. Strengths are the behaviors people use to get things done in their relationships. So strengths are like tools in your relational toolbox. And really the good news is that you have lots of strengths and lots of tools in your toolbox. The challenge for some of us is we get comfortable with a few tools, maybe the tools that are kind of on the top of our strength portrait, and you see that portrayed here on the screen, or to use the metaphor, on the top shelf of our toolbox, and those are the only tools we use. You know, you've probably heard it said that if the only tool you have is a hammer, then every problem starts to look like a nail. Do you know some folks maybe that seem to use a hammer a little more than they should? And if you're going to maximize the value of diverse thinking, you have to bring the right strengths to make people feel comfortable to share their thoughts freely and without hesitation, and to make it safe for them to do so. And that means each of us need to get really good at using the most appropriate strength with people, different people on our teams. Now, the SDI describes how people prioritize and use their team, their strengths, but our tools, and this is where we kind of help people with our training and platform, We help people think about building diverse teams. Um, who are the people on your team and how might they see things differently? How might they want to do things differently because they bring different strengths? So leveraging the potential of diverse thinking makes it necessary for us to bring people together who are different. Um, and that's where understanding motives helps us. The SDI uses a triangle that shows the results of the entire team to explain this motivational ecosystem and therefore the diversity of the team. And we can see that on the screen, and we see it through the lens of motives. And the strength portrait on the right hand of the screen portrays a team's strengths. Um, the strengths at the top being the ones that are probably going to be most common or most likely for the team to use, and the strengths on the bottom might be the ones that are a little more difficult to use. But with this information, leaders may want to bring some different people onto the team in order to, in pursuit of diversity of thought, people who see things differently. And they might want to invite some people who have different strengths onto the team. But the SDI and core strengths training helps you consider and see that very clearly. The bottom line is the key to better communication and collaboration and less conflict and more diverse thinking is to know your audience. So I invite all of you right now to think about important stakeholders in your world, in your life. How does your manager or your manager's manager see things differently than you do? How does your spouse see things differently than you do, think differently than you do? How about some folks on your team, your colleagues, your clients? It's likely that all of these people see things a little differently than you at times, and that's a good thing. That's what diversity of thought is all about. And I'd also encourage you to think about what's driving them. How do they like to use their strengths? What might trigger conflict for them? And how do you engage and energize? And how do you affirm them and offer them feedback most productively? And all of that can be developed through emotional intelligence. And so let me leave you with three kind of quick tips here on how to work better with people, bring out the best in others, and make it safe for diversity of thought. ABC, assess motives, bring the right strengths, and communicate in the right style. And if everyone in your organization were practicing ABC, you'd probably have better communication, collaboration, and more diverse, innovative thinking when you're dealing with organizational challenges and trying to innovate and solve problems. So, how might relationship intelligence be applied? Well, I'd like to show you our platform, a tool we use to help people connect and communicate, compare their results with other people. We call this the Core Strengths platform, and these are my assessment results, my SDI 2.0 assessment results here on the screen. But what I want to share with you is the ability that the platform offers for you to compare your way of seeing the world with someone else on your team who may see the world differently. So I have a red motivational value system. I have red motives that keep me focused on performance, but a colleague, a member of my team, Amy, she sees the world very differently. She's motivated by the protection, growth, and welfare of others. She has a strong desire to help and wants to be of genuine benefit. And if I want to bring out the best in Amy, I need to honor what's important to Amy. And so seeing someone's SDI results can help do that. I can also easily see Amy or any of my colleagues' strengths, how they like to use the tools in their toolbox. And so bringing out the best in Amy might be putting her in a position to use some of her top tools, or maybe I want to encourage Amy to use some of the tools that fall a little deeper in her toolbox. And this is probably the most practical aspect of relationship intelligence. I can get some real-time tips, and this insight is available on any digital device. So my smartphone, my screen, my tablet, I can get some advice on how to plan and conduct a meeting with Amy in a way that will make her feel comfortable and valued, and invite her to kind of be herself and bring out the best in her. Or if I'm writing an email and I want to make sure that it lands right, and I want to get her attention, and I want her to respond, and I want her to feel good about what I'm asking her to do, I might use this advice as I craft the message. Holding a conversation with Amy, some quick tips, even things to avoid when working with Amy, so that I don't unknowingly trigger conflict for her and make it harder for her to contribute and do her best work. And then just finally, I'll show you that we can create teams on the platform. We can put together a variety of teams, people we work with. You're on multiple teams. Most organizations are matrixed in some way now. We can create a team view of any team you're on. It's not, and you create it, because if you work with us, we give you access to this platform, and you can make teams for all the teams you're on. Project teams, your primary team, your special committee, the party planning committee team you're on, all that is available. So I'd love to talk more about that, but I know my time is coming to an end. So I want to just conclude with what I think is a very, very powerful statement from the author, Harper Lee. She said, people generally see what they look for and hear what they listen for. And so as we work with people, are we looking for opportunities to invite diversity of thought? Do we recognize how someone on our team might have a different point of view, and we really need to embrace and leverage that point of view? Or are we just listening for what we want to hear? Again, our tools provide the opportunity for people to see more, to hear more, to know more about their colleagues. And so here's some next steps you might want to take. It's been an honor for me to share this information with you today. We'd love to stay in conversation with you. Some ways to do that might be for you to visit our website. Really everything we do is kind of explained well on that website. Again, the client stories are under the resources section, but just look around. We invite you to come and tour the website. We're doing a workshop in coordination with the National Diversity Council to really present in full everything we do, give each person in that workshop the chance to take the assessment and learn more about themselves and other people and how to apply relationship intelligence. And we're doing this via Zoom on July 8th and 9th. It'll be, I think, four hours over the course of 2 days, something like that. We're doing it at a deeply discounted rate because we want to make this, we want to expose our work, you to our work, and hopefully add value to your professional life. We're doing it at a deep discount. So the information on how to log in and or how to register for that is there. And you can always reach out to my colleague, Dominique Caminos, who's an active member of the National Diversity Council, for the opportunity to maybe complete the SDI 2.0, just learn more, talk to Dominique, let her answer your questions. She's awesome and available to answer just about any question you may have, and that's her contact information. I'll give you just a second to make note of that. And I will conclude with a final thought. Human spirit is the ability to face the uncertainty of the future with curiosity and optimism. It's the belief that problems can be solved, differences resolved. It is a type of confidence and it's fragile. And um, in this really, really difficult season we're in, there are some major issues that need to be addressed. They desperately need to be addressed. There is a sense of uncertainty about the future for many people, but I still believe in the power of the human spirit to rise to these challenges and overcome and take us to a better place. And it's fragile, but we've got to invest. And so to the people who are part of the National Diversity Council, I say keep up that good fight. Keep doing this work. We need you, and I'd love to be a partner in this effort with you, especially when it comes to harnessing the power of diversity of thought. So with that, I conclude. I say thank you, and I'll turn the session back over to Dijaron.
Thank you so much, Dr. Patterson. We appreciate you taking the time today to educate our audience on this very important topic. Well, thank you all for joining. If you have any questions or concerns, please email me at dijaron.campbell@nationaldiversitycouncil.org. Enjoy the rest of your day.